Welcome back. This is our educational webinar for the All Hazards Consortium and its multi-state fleet response working group. On the phone with us today is Kevin Gambold, CEO of Unmanned Experts. So, Kevin, on this short video, can you talk about some of the policy operating rules as of today, which I'll put a date on, December 17th, 2015. It's changing monthly, it seems, and I understand there's even changes now. The FAA's just announced on this as well. So maybe if you can give our audience kind of a quick primer on this, I think this will be an interesting topic in the future, I'm sure.
Absolutely, delighted to. And you'll be pleased to know that this section, operating policy, is very much in flux. And so I'm pleased you dated it, because 2 weeks, 6 months, 1 year from now, who knows? And I'm going to cover some of the likely changes, I think, if you don't mind. Put that way. Okay, so what are the rules? Well, of course, everyone's got one of these, or their niece has, and the RC hobbyist community in the US, which is basically run around a group called the Amateur, darn it, you have to pause here. I think what it's called. Amateur. The Aeronautical Modelers Association, the AMA, has actually been in existence for longer than the Federal Aviation Authority. So I think they're about 100 years old, and the FAA is about 60 years old. So unfortunately, up until now, all the RC modelists have been left to their own, called community-based regulation and guidance, and they follow their own regulations. They're very professional about it, even though they're by definition amateur. However, this prevalence, or this explosion of these autopilot equipped, very easy to fly, very cheap in comparison, drones, these stealth drones, especially the quadcopter ones, which require very little skill and training, have meant that they think they're selling about 2,000 a month, and I believe they're looking at about 1 million or so to be sold in the US over Christmas. So this has got everybody in the aviation industry running scared. So there's a lot of change going on. Now, until recently, until actually last year, the FAA didn't touch any of these small drones. So the Federal Aviation Administration never regulated them, didn't chase after them, and that was almost by definition, but there was some grey area in the law. There was a case study done called the PERCA, it was actually case law. The FAA sued a guy for flying crazily around the campus of the University of Virginia, and it was known as the PERCA decision, and the FAA initially lost. They sued him for using the UAV commercially. He said UAV is an aircraft. They lost initially, and they appealed. And in the appeal, they partially won. And that's why everything's very confused at the moment. But in essence, it's defined that all drones are aircraft. And as such, they are administered by the FAA. So that means that even the 1 pound, or even the thing you put in the palm of your hand, if it's supposed to fly, then it is administered by the FAA. All of the FAA's rules, the ones that cover the 737 pilots, all of those now apply to you by definition. And crazily, you can actually attach a little controller to a paper airplane, and by definition, the FAA now is responsible for that, and you are a pilot. So that's fairly terrifying if you take it to an extreme. But anyway, so how does it currently stand? All right, if you want to go flying, the FAA own the airspace, and they let you do it in really 3 ways at the moment. The fourth is kind of in debate. The first one is, if you are not commercial and you're a university or you're a federal agency, state agency, maybe tribal, public safety, police, fire, etc., example, says you will have to do ground school training like a normal pilot would do, which isn't too arduous. But apart from that, you don't need to have a pilot's license. There are some exceptions. But if you are a local firefighter and you want to do it under this route, then you need to go the public tour route. And that's probably the best way. About a year or so back, about this time last year in fact, it was a part of the Reauthorization Act in 2012, and everyone ignored it. It was Section 323 of the paragraph. And it basically said, if the FAA don't think you'll be a danger, they can let you fly. I mean, that's basically all it said. And suddenly, this entire commercial industry has come out of this in the last year. From, I think, 6 movie companies have what became known, or is now known as the Section 323 exemption. About this time last year, there are now over 2,000 companies. And basically, the exemption is a legal document. It used to be about 25 pages long. It's now about a page and a half. You can get them off the FAA website, just copy them. But it is the document says, I want to fly my aircraft. You have to name the aircraft type. You can name 20 of them, but name the aircraft type and say, I want to fly this aircraft as a UAV, but I want an exemption from all of those rules that apply to a 737. And you have to list the rules which say you need to have a fire act, you need to have air stewardesses, you need to be in the aircraft and have a copy of its manual with you. All the lettering on the side, which needs to be at least 2 feet high, the aircraft isn't 2 feet long, so it would be impossible. So you have to have a list of these exemptions, and they're pretty well trialed and tested now. So you apply for this exemption, you pay a lawyer to do it, an exorbitant sum, or we can do it for you if you like. But it takes about 4 months for them to process it, and then you get this exemption. It says, hey, you can fly your aircraft if you do the following things. And the following things are, you have to have a license. You have to be a manned pilot. And so you need to have somebody in your company or somebody in your group that has a manned pilot's license. It can't be a sportsman. They need to be the ones flying it. So there are a few other restrictions. It needs to be during daylight hours, visual line of sight, below 400 feet, etc. And you also have a commercial certificate of waiver authorization, which they attach to it. There's a blanket one, and it says you can fly anywhere you like, away from airfields, away from built-up areas, below 200 feet, which isn't very high, but it's high enough for most people. But that, Section 323 exemptions didn't really exist a year ago. Now is the basis for all commercial operations in the US. And it's huge. I mean, it's a big thing. Like I said, 2,500 companies, I think, right now, probably 10,000 in the queue. And that's all you have. That's the only way you can make money with a drone right now, legally. And you have to be a manned pilot. But something is coming, and it's otherwise known as the Small UAS Rule, the NPRM, or the Part 107. So, bear in mind that the FAA have been working on this for about 9 years now. It took less time to go to NASA to get to the moon. But this Small UAS Rule is designed to let you operate commercially without having a manned pilot's license. It was leaked, and they rushed it out in March of 2015, and it's proposed. And as an NPRM, as part of the rulemaking process, they tell people what they want, and then people probably get to comment. And there was about 4,000 or 5,000 comments on it. Some of it is very good, some of it is appalling. And from a commercial, professional UAV user and a pilot, it makes me want to weep. But we don't know what it'll actually look like. There will be a ground school test at the very least, with all of the subjects you normally have to cover as a manned pilot, except strap into the seat. And once you've done that test, in theory, if we follow any of the other countries in the world, you would have to do a flying test. But as it currently looks, they don't even want you to do a flying test. They just show up, may have built at home. It can be up to £55, which isn't huge, but it certainly put a dent in your Maserati when it lands on it. And there are no requirements for currency or training or anything. It's absolutely frightful. But it's possibly going to come out in June of this year, next year, June 2016. Likely, I think, to be somewhere in 2017. And I think there will be a lot of hullabaloo about it. As you may know, this week, in fact, they rushed through an extra regulation about registering your drone. And so as a commercial users using the 333 have to register theirs anyway, but a hobbyist, even your niece, as long as she's 13 years old and it weighs more than a quarter of a pound, she needs to go onto an FAA website and register her drone for $5. Anyway, don't ask me about that. We could be here all night. Good. So that's the small UAS rule. That's the next great white hope that's coming up. We hope it's going to be something amazing and sensible and runs a fine line. But who knows? What is likely to happen, I suspect, is a rule that is very unsuited to the current marketplace, lowers the barrier of entry. Hundreds of thousands of people will then be qualified legally or certified, but not qualified. No requirement for training. Prices will spiral down. Insurance claims will spiral up, and we'll have to go through a lot of pain before it gets right. There are lots of other issues, lots of other efforts going on. In fact, the Commercial U.S. Modernization Act, which was put forward by a couple of senators over this summer, would try and find a middle ground, which would have and speed the FAA up. It's currently doing what most things are doing in Congress, which is nothing, and I suspect the NPRM will beat it. So there you go. So that is the FAA rules as they stand. What did I miss? Oh.
Kevin, did they? It's December 17, 2015, and it sounds to me like the commercial, I guess the 337. That when you said that's going to be kind of a middle ground, right?
Well, I don't think that final one will come to pass. It was put through this year, this summer, and it looked reasonably sensible. It's kind of a middle ground, but it's I think it's stalled, and I think the NPRM, the Part 107, the small UAS rule, will beat it. That makes sense?
Okay, very good.
So,
very good.
okay.
Kevin, thank you. We'll in our next video we'll talk about use cases and threats. So stay tuned.